A black high school student, Maya Thomas, is publicly humiliated by a school officer in front of her peers. But when the truth comes to light, her father, Major Isaiah Thomas, steps in with quiet precision and unshakable resolve. This isn't just a story about injustice, it's a powerful reckoning fueled by truth, courage, and a father's unwavering love. It happened on a Wednesday, between third and fourth period, in the hallway just outside the chemistry lab. Maya Thomas was doing what she always did, hugging her books tight to her chest, earbuds in, eyes low, pace quick but purposeful. At 16, she was already halfway through college applications, with 2 early acceptance letters from top universities sitting quietly in her email inbox. She didn't talk much in class unless it was about schoolwork. No drama, no parties, no hallway flirtations. Just her grades, and a future she was determined to earn. She wasn't shy. She was focused. Brookhaven High in southern Arkansas was a small-town school with all the usual characters: star athletes, class clowns, the quietly brilliant, and the loud just for the sake of being loud. Maya didn't belong to any clique. She stood alone, not out of pride or fear, but because her mind was already 5 steps ahead, planning the life she wanted. She was the type of student teachers trusted to run the classroom when they had to step out, the type who always had a backup calculator and a well-worn copy of Beloved in her bag. She was also the type Officer Craig Dobson had decided to target. He was the school resource officer, but he acted more like the self-declared sheriff of Brookhaven High, always standing with his thumbs tucked into his belt like he was guarding a federal building instead of a public high school. Maya had always avoided him. She didn't make eye contact. Didn't say good morning. Didn't give him any excuse to notice her. But lately, he'd been showing up more. Too often. First, it was the odd traffic stop. Once, while she was driving home from her job at the local library, he pulled her over at a stop sign for rolling through, even though she'd come to a complete stop. Then, 2 weeks later, she caught him standing just inside the library entrance while she shelved books, not saying a word, arms crossed, staring. That day, she went home and told her mom, who frowned but said, "Just ignore him. He's probably just being protective." But Maya knew the difference between protective and predatory. And what happened in the hallway that day proved it. As she passed the intersection near the main staircase, Officer Dobson stepped forward. Too close. Too intentional. She barely had time to sidestep before he accidentally bumped her. She didn't even realize what was happening until the bottle of ice-cold water in his hand tilted forward, the plastic tapping her arm. The lid was off. The water poured. It soaked the front of her shirt, ran down her jeans, and splattered across her shoes and books. The hallway exploded into a mix of gasps and laughter. Maya froze. Papers slipped from her arms and scattered like dry leaves on the floor. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The laughter twisted around her like barbed wire. Her shirt clung to her skin. Her breath caught. And Officer Dobson just stood there, cool as ever, the faintest smirk on his face as he said, "Guess someone's a little clumsy today." She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her heart thundered in her ears. Her fingers trembled as she bent to collect her wet notebooks and loose pages. Someone snickered nearby. She didn't look up. She didn't let herself. Not even when she heard the word pathetic whispered behind her. She walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just forward. 1 step at a time, holding her dripping binder like a shield. She didn't cry in the nurse's office where she changed shirts. She didn't cry in the empty classroom where she skipped lunch. She didn't cry until she was alone in her car with the windows rolled up and the key not yet in the ignition. And even then, it was just 1 tear. Not enough to release the pain. Just enough to taste it. What no one knew, not her teachers, not even her closest coworker at the library, was that this wasn't random. It wasn't clumsiness or coincidence. It was calculated. Deliberate. And it had everything to do with him, Noah Dobson. Noah was Officer Dobson's son. Same grade. Same school. They even shared AP US history. And that's where it started. 2 months earlier, during a classroom debate about systemic injustice, Maya had made a clear, confident argument backed by facts and lived experience. Noah didn't like it. Especially not when the class applauded her points. Especially not when she smiled politely as he stumbled through his counterargument, fumbling with stats he pulled from a questionable website. From that day on, the tension built. Quiet, petty things, eye rolls, whispered comments, fake coughs to drown out her answers in class. But Maya ignored him. He was noise, and she had bigger things to focus on. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Noah had gone home and spun a story. Told his father that Maya was confrontational. Disrespectful. That she rolled her eyes in class. That she had been acting strange around him, maybe even threatening. He didn't say anything about losing the debate. He didn't say anything about her being smarter. Or black. Or female. But the implication was loud enough. And his father? He believed every word. No questions. No balance. Just pure, blind loyalty. So Officer Dobson started showing up in places Maya didn't expect him. The parking lot at dusk. The hallway when she was alone. The library stacks. The corner of the gym during after-school tutoring. Always watching. Always silent. Until he wasn't. That day in the hallway wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was an escalation. A message. A test. And Maya, the quiet, composed Maya, passed it with silence. Not because she was weak, but because she didn't trust the system to protect her. Not yet. Not when it had already failed her more than once. Still, something shifted that day. Something cracked. As she sat alone during lunch, hands shaking, she realized the truth: this wouldn't stop on its own. He would keep pushing. Keep humiliating. Until she either broke or someone made him stop. But she wasn't alone. Not completely. That afternoon, as the final bell rang and Maya packed her bag with soggy papers and damp sleeves, Mr. Harris, her government teacher, called her name from the doorway. He was one of the few teachers who saw her, really saw her. The kind who didn't assume silence meant apathy. The kind who noticed when a student's spark started to dim. "Maya," he said gently. "You sure everything's all right?" She paused, standing just inside the threshold of the classroom, fingers curled tightly around the strap of her backpack. She hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, "I didn't do anything." That's all it took. Mr. Harris didn't ask more questions. He didn't push. He just nodded and said, "I believe you." It was the first time someone had said it out loud. Later that evening, when Maya walked through the front door of her home, she saw them immediately, her dad's combat boots, caked with dried red clay, sitting by the entryway. Her breath caught. He was home. Major Isaiah Thomas didn't announce his returns. He just showed up. And when he did, it was usually because something mattered. Because something needed him. He looked up from the kitchen table as she entered. Their eyes met. And before he said a word, he knew. What happened? His voice was calm. Not gentle. Not angry. Just firm. Steady. Military. Maya didn't answer right away. She stood there, backpack still on, her body rigid with the effort of holding it all in. Her mom stirred a pot on the stove, watching silently. And then, without planning to, Maya spoke. She told them everything. The stop sign. The silence. The hallway. The bottle. The look on Dobson's face. Noah. The debate. The whispers. She expected outrage. Shouting. Threats. She expected her dad to slam his hand down on the table and demand names. Instead, he simply nodded. Once. Then he stood, walked to his office, closed the door behind him, and didn't come out for the rest of the night. But Maya knew, even as she stared at that closed door with her heart pounding, that something had changed. Because Isaiah Thomas wasn't just listening. He was preparing. And the man who had spent a career studying enemy patterns, anticipating attacks, and planning counterstrikes had just been given a mission. And for the first time in days, Maya felt something other than fear. She felt the shift. The moment before the truth walks into the room. That night, the silence in the Thomas household felt heavier than usual. After everything that had happened at school, the stares, the whispers, the laughter still echoing in her mind, Maya didn't speak much during dinner. She moved through the kitchen like a ghost, her soaked backpack still lying in the hallway where she'd dropped it hours ago. Her mother asked if she was okay. Maya nodded. That was all. No details. No emotion. Just a quiet "I'm fine," the kind of answer a girl gives when she knows the truth won't change anything. But the moment she turned toward the stairs, she froze. The boots were back. Mud caked on the soles. Laces still tucked military tight. Her father was home. Major Isaiah Thomas was a man of few words, but his presence filled any room he entered. A career Army officer, now retired but never quite disconnected from the habits he'd built over decades of service. Even when he came back from long stretches away, months at a time spent advising units overseas, he didn't knock, didn't announce himself. He simply returned. Quietly. Always when it mattered. He was sitting at the kitchen table now, flipping slowly through the local paper like he hadn't just walked back into their lives. His expression was calm, unreadable. But when Maya stepped into view, their eyes locked, and everything she'd been holding in, all the cold shame from the hallway, the humiliation that clung to her skin like that soaked shirt, surged forward like a wave. He saw it. Instantly. She didn't need to say a word. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Maya hesitated. Her mother stood at the stove, wooden spoon stilled in midair. There was no more pretending. No more "I'm fine." So she told them. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic burst. But piece by piece. The stop sign incident, the way Officer Dobson had followed her after work, the time he'd stood in the library saying nothing, just watching her shelve books like she was some kind of threat. And then the hallway, how he bumped into her, tipped the bottle, soaked her shirt in front of everyone, then smiled like he'd won. The laughter. The way no one said anything. The silence. She told them about Noah Dobson, too. The debate in AP history. The resentment she saw in his eyes when she corrected him in front of the class. The way he'd slipped in snide remarks afterward. And the creeping suspicion that somehow, all of this was connected. Isaiah didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When she was done, she expected him to stand up. Maybe storm out. Yell. Threaten to go to the school that very night and demand answers. But he didn't do any of that. He simply nodded once, turned away, and walked down the hallway to his office. He closed the door behind him. And he didn't come out. But Maya knew her father. She knew that silence didn't mean nothing. It meant calculation. It meant action was coming. She remembered being 10 years old, hearing him say that real power doesn't need to announce itself, it moves in silence and hits with precision. That night, while the rest of the house settled into a tense quiet, Isaiah moved like a man on a mission. He pulled out his old military laptop, the one no one else was allowed to touch. He brought out a metal file box she hadn't seen in years. And then he went to work. By dawn, he had Officer Craig Dobson's entire career mapped out. Not just his public record, but complaint filings, traffic stop data, patterns of reported behavior. He saw what others missed or ignored. There was a pattern. A clear one. Dobson had a history of disproportionately stopping, questioning, and intimidating black students in and around Brookhaven. Quiet cases. Buried reports. 3 years ago, a junior named Marcus Clay had reported being followed home from basketball practice. It went nowhere. A year before that, a freshman was pulled from class and questioned about loitering in the library. Nothing ever came of it. But Isaiah saw the dots, and he connected them. That morning, as Maya dragged herself to the kitchen, Isaiah was already seated at the table, a manila envelope in front of him. His eyes were sharp, but calm. "Eat something," he said simply. She barely touched her toast. Her stomach was twisted in knots. But she noticed how he watched her, not just like a father, but like a strategist preparing for a briefing. Then he pushed the envelope toward her. "Because this ends today." At 10:14 a.m., Isaiah Thomas walked through the front doors of Brookhaven High without a single word. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't need to be. The way he carried himself, every step deliberate, every movement purposeful, turned heads instantly. Students paused mid-conversation. Teachers straightened without thinking. He didn't cause a scene. Didn't raise his voice. He walked straight to the front office and asked to speak with Principal Honora Briggs. Principal Briggs was the kind of administrator who preferred to stay out of controversy. Calm, diplomatic, always trying to de-escalate. But when she looked up and saw Major Isaiah Thomas standing in her doorway, holding a thick file and a stare that didn't flinch, she knew this wasn't going to be something she could sidestep. He sat down across from her, laid out the documentation, and spoke clearly. Fact by fact. Report by report. Incident by incident. He didn't embellish. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Then he asked one question. "Do you want to fix this in-house, or should I take it public?" Briggs looked down at the documents. Her face tightened. She flipped through pages. Saw dates. Patterns. Names. Connections. The silence stretched. But Isaiah didn't wait for an answer. Because 2 hours later, he had already scheduled a meeting with a civil rights attorney in Little Rock. And a call was placed to a journalist at the Arkansas Tribune, someone who had written a series of award-winning articles on police misconduct in schools. By the time Maya got to sixth period, the rumors had already started to spread. Students whispered in corners. Teachers looked uneasy. And the hallway that had once burned with her shame now buzzed with a strange kind of energy, like a fuse had been lit and no one knew when it was going to blow. At home that evening, Maya opened her inbox and found a message from a classmate she barely knew. "Hey. I saw what he did. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I should have." 2 more messages followed. Then 5. Then 10. A few from students she hadn't even realized were watching. A few from black boys who said Officer Dobson had done the same to them, minus the water. One even admitted to being pulled over on his way to a part-time job and interrogated about where he was headed. Maya didn't respond to most of them. Not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she didn't know what to say yet. She was still processing the shift. That night, she heard her dad in the kitchen on the phone. She couldn't hear every word, but one phrase carried clear: "We've got enough to make it public. Let's make sure they know we're not bluffing." And she realized this wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. It was about every time a voice like hers was ignored. Every time someone chose silence over standing up. Every hallway that swallowed injustice behind laughter and shrugs. But now, for the first time, the silence was cracking. And the truth was starting to speak. By Monday morning, the hallways of Brookhaven High felt different. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in that sharp, quiet tension people feel when something big is about to break. The same students who had laughed 5 days earlier now turned their gazes away when Maya walked by. The whispers weren't gone, but they'd shifted, no longer mocking, but curious. Nervous. Some were asking questions in hushed tones. "Did you hear her dad filed a report? Is it true they're investigating Dobson? Yo, I think it's in the paper this week." Maya didn't respond. She just kept walking, her books held tight, her steps steady. The girl they'd seen humiliated in the hallway last week wasn't gone, she just stood back up. And this time, her silence felt different. This time, it felt like power. At exactly 8:12 a.m., before first period even began, Officer Craig Dobson was summoned to the front office. No sirens. No loud voices. Just a knock on his door from Principal Briggs and a district representative standing behind her. He was told to bring his badge. The smirk he wore last week was nowhere in sight. By 8:30, his office was empty. His badge rested quietly on a folded sheet of paper labeled "Suspension Pending Investigation." And just like that, the hallway where he once loamed, thumbs hooked in his belt, eyes always watching, felt less like a threat and more like air finally coming back into the building. But the story didn't stop there. By lunch, the Arkansas Tribune had published a piece titled, "Promising Junior Harassed by School Officer, Father's Evidence Uncovers Pattern of Abuse." It wasn't sensational, it didn't need to be. The facts did the work. It included data from traffic stops, student testimony, and quietly buried complaint records that had never been acted on. It mentioned that more students had come forward, 3, in fact. 2 black boys and 1 Latina girl, each with similar stories, being followed, questioned for no reason, made to feel like criminals inside the very building where they were supposed to feel safe. Maya read the article on her phone between 4th and 5th period, sitting in a quiet corner of the library where she usually studied alone. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just read it all, twice, and then slipped the phone back into her bag. For the first time in days, her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't pound. She just breathed. What Maya didn't know yet was that the story was spreading. Not just in her school, not just in her town. The article was shared on social media. Teachers in other schools reposted it. A local TV station reached out for comment. Civil rights groups asked for a copy of the evidence file. And within 48 hours, the Brookhaven School Board scheduled a meeting, closed-door, emergency session. But Maya wasn't looking for headlines. She didn't want cameras or sympathy. What she wanted was the moment to come. The one her father had been preparing her for. The moment when the truth would be heard in the only place that mattered most. It came a week later. No microphones. No flashing lights. No lawyers or reporters in the hallway. Just a plain, windowless conference room in the district office, a round table, 4 chairs, and a clock that ticked too loudly in the silence. Maya sat on one side of the table, her hands folded in her lap. Her father waited outside. He had offered to go in with her, but she'd shaken her head. This part, she had to do alone. Across from her sat Craig Dobson. No uniform. No badge. Just a man in a stiff-collared shirt, shifting in his seat and refusing to meet her eyes. He looked older in civilian clothes. Smaller, somehow. The district mediator introduced the purpose of the meeting, restorative dialogue. An opportunity for those involved to speak, hear, and be heard. The woman's voice was calm and measured. But Maya barely registered her words. She didn't need a script. She came with the truth. And when the room went silent, Maya began. "You humiliated me," she said, her voice steady. Not raised. Not trembling. Just even. Direct. You poured water on me in front of everyone. You smiled while people laughed at me. You didn't say sorry. You didn't even flinch. And that wasn't the first time you followed me. You stopped me. You stared at me while I worked. You made me feel unsafe, and I didn't even know why, until I realized you were doing it because your son couldn't handle being second in the class. Dobson finally looked up, his lips parted like he wanted to respond, but he didn't. You believed every word he said, she continued. Because you didn't want to believe that a black girl could be smarter than your son. Or speak better. Or win a debate you weren't even there to see. You made me feel like I'd done something wrong just for existing. Dobson's jaw clenched. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet. That wasn't my intention. Maya didn't blink. You spilled water on me in front of an entire hallway. What was your intention? Silence. I don't need you to apologize, she added after a long pause. I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to know that I saw you. I see you. And now, so does everyone else. She stood. The mediator offered a nod. Dobson didn't speak again. Outside the room, Isaiah Thomas stood waiting by the car. No clipboard. No folders. Just the quiet strength of a man who had moved mountains without ever needing to raise his voice. Maya got in. Buckled her seatbelt. Exhaled. Her father looked over. How'd it feel? She didn't smile. But she nodded. Like I won without having to fight. He nodded back. That's what real power looks like. The days that followed were quieter. No dramatic school-wide assembly. No town hall protest. Just slow, steady change. Officer Dobson's suspension became indefinite. The district announced a third-party audit of all student discipline data. Diversity and equity training was added to the professional development calendar. Students who had never spoken up before suddenly found their voices. Maya didn't go back to being invisible. She didn't want to. She joined a student advocacy group. Started mentoring younger girls. Wrote an op-ed for the state youth leadership column titled, "The Cost of Silence." It ended with the line she had spoken from the stage at the youth summit the week before: silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the moment before the truth walks into the room. When the article hit the school paper, it wasn't just shared, it was framed and posted outside the main office. Noah Dobson didn't speak to her after that. He deleted his old posts, dropped out of AP history, and kept to himself. No one really missed his jokes. Even his friends had fallen silent around him. And as for Maya, she didn't gloat. She didn't walk around with a chip on her shoulder. She just walked taller. Spoke clearer. Laughed more. And when she passed the same hallway where it all happened, she didn't flinch. Because that moment, the laughter, the cold water, the shame, didn't define her anymore. It marked the start of her becoming someone no one could ignore. And every student who ever felt small, or scared, or silenced, now had someone standing for them. Not with noise, but with truth. There are moments in life that try to strip us of our dignity, not with fists or fury, but with silence, with humiliation, with quiet acts meant to shrink who we are. Maya Thomas's story is one of those moments. But more than that, it's a story about what happens when truth stands up in the face of injustice and doesn't blink. This wasn't just about a spilled bottle of water or a hallway full of laughter. It was about power. About how it's used. About who gets to wield it and who's expected to shrink beneath it. Maya didn't yell. She didn't fight back in the way her tormentor expected. She stood in her silence, in her composure, in her truth. And that truth, backed by courage, by community, by a father who refused to stay quiet, spoke louder than any shouted words ever could. The lesson here is clear: you don't have to match someone's cruelty to prove your strength. You don't have to respond with rage to expose injustice. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand tall, speak when you're ready, and let the truth carry its own weight. Power without accountability is just noise. But truth? Truth moves like water. It seeps in, cracks the surface, and over time, it changes everything. If you've ever felt silenced, ignored, or made to feel small just for doing the right thing, let this story remind you: your voice matters, even when it shakes. Your truth matters, even when it's challenged. And your presence, your purpose, and your persistence have the power to shift the room. And if you're in a position of power, whether you're a teacher, a coach, a parent, or an officer, never underestimate the impact of what you say and how you say it. Kids are listening. They're watching. And they're carrying your words long after the bell rings. From all of us here at U.S. Justice Story, thank you for listening. If Maya's story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone in your life, please share it. Start a conversation. Be the one who speaks up, or be the one who believes when someone else finds the courage to speak. Because change doesn't always begin with protest, it often begins with someone quietly saying, "I believe you." Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate the quiet power of doing what's right.